Warning: this video contains themes and narratives of a mature nature, including violence, murder, and disturbing events. It is not suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. All stories are based on historical accounts, legends, and true crime cases. We present them for informational and educational purposes only.
Antarctica, 1982. There are places on the planet where the very air seems saturated with fear, and where a person dares to go only to confirm it. One such place is the icy deserts of Antarctica. It was here, in 1982, that one of the most sinister mysteries unfolded. This is the story of the expedition that vanished. A group of scientists who went deep into the continent but never returned. The White Rose base was small but well-equipped. It was established to study the subglacial oceans, where scientists believed life might exist. The expedition, consisting of 6 people, made contact every day, transmitting data and reports on their work. But one day, the radio silence lingered. At first, it didn't cause panic, but when the silence continued for several days, a rescue team was sent to the base. What they discovered shocked them. The camp was completely abandoned, but not as if it had been hastily evacuated. It seemed to have been destroyed. All records and equipment were smashed, and the computers were shattered to pieces. The only thing left was a mysterious inscription written on the wall with coal. "She's below us. She wants to get out. She wants to breathe." No one knew what it meant. The inscription was sloppy, as if written by a person in a panic, and this fact made everyone wonder what had happened. This story is not just a chilling fairy tale, but a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left untouched. It serves as an eternal warning that the most terrifying things can hide beneath the most ordinary surfaces, and that some mysteries should not be solved because they hide something that is better left in the darkness.
Morse Dark, 1948. In 1948, a small town called Morse Dark, nestled in the depths of the California forests, became the backdrop for an event that would forever change its history. It wasn't just an incident, but a puzzle shrouded in a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. It all began with the discovery of a man's body. He was found near a deserted forest road, and his death bore the mark of something ominous. There were no signs of a struggle on the body, no wounds. Only one, but very important detail that baffled the police. On his arm was a tattoo of a snake coiled around a skull. The police investigating the case were unable to identify the man. There were no documents in his pockets, and his fingerprints were not in any database. But that wasn't the strangest detail. Clutched in one of his hands was a small piece of paper with a mysterious cipher written on it. It consisted of several lines of symbols and letters. No one could decipher it. For many years, cryptologists and detectives tried to solve the cipher, but no avail. It seemed like a meaningless set of symbols, but the mysterious tattoo and the fact that the man was found dead suggested that something monstrous was hidden behind it. Rumors quickly spread through the small town. People said the man was a spy, that the cipher was the key to a treasure, or that it was a curse that had brought death. This story became part of the local folklore and attracts many researchers who are still trying to unravel it. This story is a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left untouched. It serves as an eternal warning that the most terrifying things can hide beneath the most ordinary surfaces, and that some mysteries should not be solved because they hide something that is better left in the darkness.
San Jose, California, 1884. Some houses are built for living.
Others are built to avoid death. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose was neither. It was an eternal labyrinth that Sarah Winchester, the heiress to a firearms fortune, built for 38 years to appease the souls of those killed by her husband's rifles. It wasn't construction, but a curse that continued until her death, and the house became a true haven for the dead. After the death of her husband, William Winchester, Sarah, according to legend, consulted a medium. The medium told her that her family was haunted by the ghosts of all those who died from a Winchester rifle. To appease them, she had to build a house that was never to be finished. She bought a small house in San Jose and hired a crew of workers who worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But they weren't just building a house, they were building a labyrinth. Staircases leading to the ceiling, doors that opened to nowhere, and corridors that led to dead ends appeared in the house. The goal was one: to confuse the ghosts. But according to rumors, it didn't work. Instead of appeasing the souls of the dead, the house became teeming with them. Numerous guests and workers reported strange sounds, whispers, and visions. Some said they saw ghosts in the corridors, while others heard the sound of footsteps that seemed to come from under the floor. One of the workers reported seeing a ghost in the mirror that was looking at him. He described it as a figure dressed in old clothes that slowly dissolved into the air. The Winchester Mystery House has become a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left untouched. It serves as an eternal warning that the most terrifying things can hide beneath the most ordinary surfaces, and that some mysteries should not be solved because they hide something that is better left in the darkness. Paris, France, 1980. Every year, millions of tourists flock to Paris to admire its lights, art, and romance. But few know that beneath the city's bustling streets lies something that can make one's blood run cold. A labyrinth of underground tunnels where the remains of 6 million people rest. This place is called the Catacombs, and here, the history of Paris takes its most chilling turn. What began as a necessity in the early 18th century to deal with overflowing cemeteries turned into a legend of a place where evil still resides. According to rumors, satanic rituals were held in these catacombs. Tales of this were passed down from generation to generation. People said that in the darkness, you could hear a faint whisper that seemed to come from the bones themselves. Others reported feeling a sudden cold, even when it was warm on the surface, and seeing strange shadows that moved in the dark. These stories, which became part of Parisian folklore, attract many paranormal investigators who try to find evidence of ghosts. One of the investigators, who spent a night in the catacombs, said that he heard a faint whisper that seemed to come from the wall. He said that it was a whisper in Latin, and that it was so faint that it could only be heard in complete silence. He also said that he saw a shadow that seemed to be dressed in old clothes, and that it moved slowly and then simply dissolved into the air. He said that it was the scariest thing he had ever seen. He also reported feeling a sudden cold, even when it was warm on the surface. The story of the Paris catacombs is a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left untouched. It serves as an eternal warning that the most terrifying things can hide beneath the most ordinary surfaces, and that some mysteries should not be solved because they hide something that is better left in the darkness. Utah, USA, 1974. In the snowy mountains of Utah, where wild nature reigns supreme, 3 hunters embarked on their annual expedition. They were experienced trackers, well prepared for the harsh conditions, and their disappearance was inexplicable. When they didn't return at the appointed time, a rescue team was sent to find them. They eventually discovered an abandoned camp. The tents were intact, The gear was in place, but the men were gone. A deafening silence fell, undisturbed even by the wind. The solitary campfire slowly smoldered as if the hunters had left only a few minutes ago. But intuition told the rescuers that something was wrong. Investigators at the scene found their journals. The first entries were ordinary, describing the trip and the details of the hunt. But then, the tone of the narrative abruptly changed. The entry spoke of being pursued by something that was not human. We hear something in the woods. It's not a bear or a wolf. It walks on two legs but makes no sound. The following entries were even more panicked. It is watching us. We see shadows moving among the trees and hear a faint whisper that seems to come from the air. We tried to escape, but it is always one step ahead. The last entry was simply, "It found us. It is looking at us from the darkness. It is..." The investigators never found the hunter's remains, and the mystery remained unsolved. Locals always knew that the Utah mountains hid dark secrets. It was said that an ancient evil lived there, punishing those who dared to disturb its peace. This story became part of American folklore and attracts many paranormal investigators who try to find evidence of the wandering hunter. The story of the wandering hunter is not just a tale of missing people. It is a chilling parable that the most terrifying predators do not always have flesh and bones. It serves as an eternal warning that in forests where there are no witnesses, human life can be extinguished without a trace, and the only proof remains encrypted on the pages of a diary that will never be read again.
Chicago, Illinois, 1996. In the criminal world, there are perpetrators who try to evade justice. And then there are those like Keith Hunter Jesperson who scream about their evil deeds, yet no one listens. Known as the Happy Face Killer, he was a serial murderer who wanted to be caught. He himself wrote letters of confession, sending them to newspapers and the police. But his messages were simply ignored, leading to the arrest of an innocent man. This story is a grim reminder of how close evil can be, and that even when it looks us straight in the face, we may not see it. For several years, Jesperson traveled across the country in his truck. He killed women on the road, and these murders remained unsolved. To get attention, he began sending letters of confession. In his messages, he described each murder in detail, and to prove his involvement, he included photographs of his victims. But the police ignored his letters, dismissing them as the work of a lunatic. They didn't even try to verify the information he provided. While his messages went unanswered, the police arrested another man who was accused of murdering one of Jesperson's victims. The innocent man was sentenced to life in prison, while Jesperson continued to commit murders, laughing at how easily he could deceive the system. He even drew a smiling face on his letters to mock those who ignored him. Eventually, he was arrested, but not for his confessed crimes. He was caught for another murder he committed in Arizona. Only then did he confess to his crimes, and the police began to verify his statements. The story of Keith Jesperson is not just a story of a serial killer. It is a tale of how human overconfidence and carelessness can lead to tragic consequences. It is a chilling reminder that evil does not always hide in the shadows, but sometimes openly laughs in our faces. His smile on the letters is an eternal warning that the most terrible crimes can be committed by those who are desperately begging to be caught.
Nanking, China, 1937. In December 1937, Nanking, the ancient capital of China, was not just a city. It was the living heart of a nation. But in an instant, it transformed into a place where civilization collapsed and madness reigned. Japanese troops entered the city, beginning a 6-week-long slaughter that became one of the darkest chapters in human history. It was not a battle, but a systematic extermination. This story is not just a list of events, it's a cry for those who were forgotten. When the city fell, Japanese soldiers met no resistance. They began a systematic and brutal massacre of the civilian population. Over 300,000 civilians, including women, children, and the elderly, were killed. Bodies were scattered in the streets, and the rivers were filled with corpses. The soldiers spared no one. Their actions were driven by hatred and a thirst for blood. Those who managed to survive recounted that it was not just a mass murder, but a ritual of humiliation and cruelty. Witnesses to those terrible events said they saw soldiers using civilians as living targets and their bodies being thrown into the streets. Those who tried to hide were found and brutally killed. The city became a place where fear and despair were the only feelings people could experience. The few who managed to survive saw their families killed before their eyes. They said that it was something that surpassed human understanding. The story of the Nanking Massacre is not just a tragedy. It is an eternal reminder of how easily humanity can descend into the abyss of madness when hatred and power take over. It is a chilling echo of the past that still resonates in the empty streets of Nanking. It is a warning that even the most peaceful cities can witness the most terrible crimes, and that their memory must live on forever so that such events never happen again.
London, UK, 1984. An old Victorian house nestled in a quiet London alley seemed ordinary. It had seen generations pass, holding the stories of families, their joys and sorrows. But behind its unassuming facade lay a secret so chilling it became a true nightmare for its new owner. This is the story of how a seemingly ordinary attic can hold the most sinister of secrets. This is the story of the skeleton in the attic. The house's new owners, a young couple, bought it with enthusiasm. They dreamed of renovating it and turning it into a cozy family home. But during the renovation, they discovered that the attic, which seemed to have been abandoned for decades, was sealed with an old lock. When they broke it open, they were in for a surprise. Inside were many old things, but in a corner, they discovered something far more shocking: a skeleton sitting in an old armchair. The police who arrived at the scene were stunned. The skeleton belonged to the previous tenant who had gone missing 10 years ago. His disappearance had been written off as a runaway or suicide. No one could have imagined he was so close within arm's reach. His body was found in complete solitude, and no one knew that he had died in his house just a few feet away from the residence. It was not just a murder. It was a silent crime that took place in plain sight. The investigation yielded no results. The cause of death was never determined, and the case was closed. But for those who lived in that house, the mystery of the skeleton in the attic became their personal curse. The story of the skeleton in the attic is not just a tale of missing people. It is a chilling parable that the most terrifying secrets are not always hidden, but sometimes just waiting to be found. It is a grim reminder that even the most familiar places can hold the most terrible secrets. And some tragedies are so silent that they are not heard even from above until it's too late.
San Francisco, California, 1968. The city, known for its freedom and the spirit of love, suddenly descended into an abyss of horror. A killer appeared on its streets, one who did not hide, but on the contrary, craved attention. He didn't just kill his victims, he played a game with the police and the public. He called himself Zodiac, and his story is a chilling reminder of how easy it is to hide in plain sight. For 2 years, the Zodiac terrorized the outskirts of San Francisco, attacking young people. His victims were couples who just wanted to spend some time alone. He would sneak up on them and then cold-bloodedly kill them. But his crimes were only part of his sinister game. His main weapon was the letters he sent to newspapers. In them, he detailed his murders and left mysterious ciphers that no one could solve. The police and journalists were baffled. They couldn't understand why a killer would want to be found and what his messages meant. The ciphers he sent seemed like meaningless sets of symbols, but in them, as he claimed, was the key to his identity. And although some of the ciphers were solved, his true identity was never established. The Zodiac became a ghost who roamed the streets of San Francisco, and no one could catch him. The Zodiac story is not just a story of a serial killer. It is a grim testament to the fact that sometimes the worst evil has no face. It is an eternal reminder that the most terrifying secrets are not always revealed, but sometimes simply fade into the past. The Zodiac vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind only fear and unsolved mysteries. His uncaptured ghost continues to haunt the minds of researchers, becoming a dark symbol of unsolved cases and the perfect crime.
Amityville, New York, 1974. This place was the perfect embodiment of the American dream, a spacious house with a view of the river, cozy and quiet. But within its walls lurked one of the most terrifying secrets in history. Because a year earlier, this house had become the scene of a terrible mass murder. Here, Ronald DeFeo Jr. coldly shot his entire family while they slept in their beds. From that moment on, the house became not just a house, but a place where evil had taken root. When the Lutz family moved into this house, they didn't know they were destined to live in it for only 28 days. In the beginning, everything was fine, but soon they began to notice strange things. Cold spots appeared in the house, strange voices and footsteps were heard, and the walls began to weep with some green slime. Soon their daughter began to communicate with an invisible friend named Jody, and the father, George Lutz, became obsessed and always felt cold. Each day brought new and more horrifying events. The family tried to live a normal life, but the evil would not relent. Books fell off shelves, doors opened and closed on their own, and one day George discovered that the ghosts of his murdered relatives had settled in the house. He was terrified, and it became clear to him that they had to leave. But leaving was not so easy. It seemed that something was trying to hold them back. With each passing minute, their mental state worsened, and the horror became more and more unbearable. Finally, they were able to escape the house, leaving all their belongings behind. They were saved, but they could never forget that nightmare.
California, USA, 1947. Hollywood is a world of illusions and bright lights, where dreams come true. But even in this world, there is a place for the darkest nightmares. In January 1947, California witnessed one of the most brutal and mysterious crimes in history. This is the story of Elizabeth Short, a young and talented actress whose life was cut short in the most terrible way. She went down in history as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short dreamed of becoming a star. Her career was just beginning, and she was full of hopes and ambitions. But at one point, her life turned into a nightmare. On January 15, 1947, her body was found in Leimert Park in Los Angeles. It was cut in two, all internal organs were removed, and her mouth was slit from ear to ear. The police were shocked by the brutality of the crime. It was not just a murder. It was an act of incredible madness. The killer didn't just kill her. He left a kind of eerie message that no one could decipher. The murder immediately became a sensation. Newspapers and magazines competed to publish new details. Elizabeth's story became a national sensation. Tens of thousands of people came to the murder scene to see what was left of her body. And the police were overwhelmed with hundreds of calls from those who claimed to know who killed her. Decades later, the case of the Black Dahlia has still not been solved. The killer has never been found, and the motives for the crime have remained unclear. The case has been filled with rumors and legends, turning into one of the most terrifying mysteries in the history of criminology. Elizabeth Short's story is an eternal reminder that even the brightest and seemingly most perfect places can hide the darkest secrets. And some nightmares never end.
London, UK, 1968. This city has always been full of mysteries, but in that year, it plunged into a real horror. A ghost appeared on its streets, one that instilled fear in the residents. He was nicknamed the Axeman. He would enter houses and cold-bloodedly kill his victims. The police couldn't find him, and the city was in a panic. This story is not just a list of events, it's a cry for those who have been forgotten. The killer operated at night. He chose houses that were in secluded alleys and entered them without leaving a trace. His victims were lonely people who suspected nothing. In the morning, the police would find the bodies, and there were no signs of forced entry or robbery in the house. The killer took nothing with him, but one thing. He took the souls of his victims. Each time he committed a new murder, the city plunged into horror. People couldn't sleep at night. They were constantly looking over their shoulders. The police were baffled. They had no clues or witnesses. They couldn't understand why the killer was committing his crimes. He was a ghost who appeared and disappeared without leaving any traces. Newspapers and magazines competed to publish new details, and rumors began to appear in the city that the killer was not a person, but a demon who had come to collect souls. Some claimed he could pass through walls, while others said he could change his appearance. He became a legend that lived in people's fear. The story of the Axeman of London is not just a story of a serial killer. It's an eternal reminder of how easy it is to hide in a big city and how little it takes to sow panic. The killer vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind only fear and unsolved mysteries. His unsolved case continues to haunt minds, and the legend of him lives on to this day, making people look at their doors with caution in the dark of night, as if the axes of the past can still break through them.
USA, 1999. There have been many serial killers in American history, but none of them were like Samuel Little. He didn't wear a mask, didn't leave behind mysterious codes, and wasn't obsessed with rituals. He was just a man who lived an ordinary life and looked like your neighbor. But behind his unremarkable appearance lurked the most prolific serial killer in American history, who killed dozens of women in the 1970s and 1980s. Samuel Little was a kind and caring person. He lived in a small house, loved to watch TV, and played cards with friends. He was a great father to his daughter, who lived separately and always answered her calls. He worked as a truck driver and often traveled across the country, which, as it turned out, was the perfect cover for his terrible deeds. He chose his victims from the most vulnerable segments of society: prostitutes, drug addicts, and homeless people, women whose disappearance would go unnoticed. For years, the police could not figure out that they were looking for the same person. The murders took place in different states, in different cities, and each death was considered unrelated to the others. Samuel Little was a ghost who traveled across the country, leaving bodies in his wake. He was so confident in his impunity that he didn't even try to hide his crimes. He simply left town after each murder. The story of Samuel Little is an eternal reminder of how easy it is to hide in plain sight, and that evil doesn't always look like a monster from a horror movie. His unsolved case continues to haunt minds, and the legend of him lives on to this day, making people look at their neighbors with caution, as if the most terrible secrets can hide right next door.
USA, 1930. The Jazz Age brought with it not only fun, but also darkness. In Madison, a small town, life went on as usual until something terrible happened. At the old Madison Hotel, which was the center of social life, a massacre occurred. And since then, the town has lived in fear. This is a story about how even the most luxurious places can hide the most terrible secrets. That night, a party was being held at the hotel. People were dancing, laughing, drinking, and having fun, unaware that their fate had already been decided. No one knows who or what caused this tragedy. At some point, the hotel doors were closed and everyone inside disappeared. When the police broke down the doors in the morning, they saw a sight that even the most experienced officers could not help but scream. All the guests were killed and their bodies were scattered throughout all the floors. All the furniture and walls were covered in blood. It was not just a murder, but a ritual that was meant to curse the hotel forever. After this tragedy, the hotel was closed. Locals tried to avoid it, and those who dared to enter told stories of hearing strange sounds and seeing shadows wandering the corridors. According to rumors, the souls of the victims still inhabit the hotel, unable to find peace. Their screams and moans, which come from the closed rooms, have become part of the local legend, attracting paranormal enthusiasts. They come to find evidence of ghosts, but many of them never return. Some of the survivors, who managed to escape by a miracle, said that it was something that surpassed human understanding. The story of the Madison Massacre is not just a tragedy. It is an eternal reminder that evil can lurk even in the brightest and most luxurious places. This is a dark chapter in the town's history that still haunts the residents. It is a warning that some places are better left untouched and some secrets should remain in the past because the truth can be too horrible to know.
Paris, France, 1968. This city has always been full of romance and light, but in that year, it plunged into a real nightmare. A ghost appeared on its streets, one that instilled fear in the residents. He was nicknamed the Man in the Mask. He would enter houses and cold-bloodedly kill his victims. The police couldn't find him, and the city was in a panic. This story is not just a list of events. It's a cry for those who have been forgotten. The killer operated at night. He chose houses that were in secluded alleys and entered them without leaving a trace. His victims were lonely people who suspected nothing. In the morning, the police would find the bodies, and there were no signs of forced entry or robbery in the house. The killer took nothing with him, but one thing. He left behind mysterious symbols at the crime scene that were never deciphered. These symbols became his calling card, and each time he committed a new murder, the city plunged into horror. The police were baffled. They had no clues or witnesses. They couldn't understand why the killer was leaving these symbols. The killer was a ghost who appeared and disappeared without leaving any traces. Newspapers and magazines competed to publish new details, and rumors began to appear in the city that the killer was not a person, that a demon who had come to collect souls. His symbols became a subject of discussion, and many tried to decipher them, but in vain. He became a legend that lived in people's fear. The story of the Man in the Mask is not just a story of a serial killer. It is an eternal reminder that some secrets should remain unsolved, and that evil is not always something we can comprehend. The killer vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind only fear and unsolved mysteries. His unsolved case continues to haunt minds, and the legend of him lives on to this day, making people look at their doors with caution in the dark of night, as if his symbols can still be inscribed on them.
Hamburg, Germany, 1950. The city that had not yet recovered from the ruins of war plunged into a new, equally terrifying nightmare. While residents were trying to rebuild their homes and lives, the streets of Hamburg became a hunting ground for an invisible monster. He was nicknamed the Butcher of Hamburg. He killed his victims and dismembered their bodies, leaving mysterious messages at the crime scene. The killer operated at night, choosing lonely people returning home. His victims disappeared without a trace until their horrifying remains were found in the most unexpected places, in alleys, abandoned warehouses, or even city parks. Each body was neatly dismembered, which testified to the killer's cold-bloodedness and skill. But the most horrifying thing was not this, but the messages he left behind. They were not words, but mysterious symbols inscribed on the walls. They looked like runes or ancient writings, and no one could understand their meaning. The police were at a dead end. Experts tried to decipher the meaning of the symbols, but in vain. They could not find a single clue, a single lead that would lead them to the killer. The Butcher of Hamburg became a ghost that terrorized the city and lived in the fear of the people. Newspapers wrote about him every day, and people were afraid to go out into the streets after dark. He was like a shadow that haunted the city, reminding it of its dark past and bringing a new horror to it. The story of the Butcher of Hamburg is not just a criminal case. It is a reminder that the most terrible secrets can be hidden right under your nose. His unsolved case continues to haunt minds, and the legend of him lives on to this day, making people look at dark alleys with caution. It is an eternal reminder that sometimes the scariest stories are those that have no conclusion.
Florence, Italy, 1978. This city has always been an open-air museum, a symbol of art and romance. But in the late 1970s, a shadow began to lurk on its picturesque hills and in its olive groves where couples in love sought solitude. The city was enveloped in fear caused by a series of brutal murders. This is a story about how Italy's most chilling and unsolved mystery turned into a legend that continues to live on. The killer, dubbed the Monster of Florence, operated in secluded places, targeting young couples who had sought privacy in their cars. His attacks were swift and incredibly brutal. He would shoot them with a handgun and then dismember their bodies with a knife or another sharp object. At each crime scene, the killer left behind mysterious symbols that were never deciphered. These symbols became his calling card, and each time he committed a new murder, the city was plunged into horror. The police could not understand why he left these marks. With each new murder, panic in Florence grew. The police were at a dead end. They had no clues or witnesses. The killer was a ghost who appeared and disappeared without leaving any trace. Newspapers wrote about him every day, and people were afraid to go out into the streets after dark. Society was paralyzed by fear, and the investigation turned into a real chaos. Over the years, dozens of people were accused of the crimes, but none of them were convicted. This is how the monster became part of the city's legend. The case of the Monster of Florence remains one of the most mysterious and chilling unsolved crimes in world history. Despite decades of investigations and numerous arrests, the true identity of the killer has never been established. Today, this story is a dark reminder that even in the most beautiful and serene corners of the world, the darkest secrets can hide. The legend of the monster lives on in stories, and couples in love on the outskirts of Florence still look around with apprehension, as if at any moment someone might emerge from the shadows.
Rome, Italy, 1968. This city, where every stone breathes history, was shaken by a series of brutal murders that disrupted the usual harmony and beauty of its streets. The legends of ancient Rome were replaced by chilling news about a ghost who killed people and left their bodies in the most unexpected public places. He became known as John Blondie, and his name has forever entered history as that of one of the most elusive and brutal killers. The killing spree began in Rome and its surrounding areas, in quiet parks, on ancient ruins, and in bustling squares. The victims of John Blondie were lonely people who were found dead in places where they should have felt safe. The police could not understand why he left the bodies there. It was a display of power, a challenge to a society he considered weak. Newspapers wrote about him every day, and people were afraid to go out, especially after dark. This was not just a killer. This was a man who turned the city into his own eerie stage. With each new murder, panic in Rome grew. The police were at a dead end. They had no clues or witnesses. John Blondie was a ghost who appeared and disappeared without leaving any trace. Society was paralyzed by fear. The investigation turned into a real chaos involving dozens of detectives and hundreds of investigators, but the killer always slept away from them. His name became a household name, a synonym for an invisible threat that could be lurking for anyone at any moment. He became an urban legend. The story of John Blondie is not just a criminal case, but a grim reminder that even in the most beautiful and bright cities, the darkest secrets can hide. His unsolved case continues to haunt minds, and the legend of him lives on to this day, making people look with apprehension at places where they once felt safe. It is an eternal reminder that evil can be invisible and unpredictable, and that sometimes the scariest stories are those that remain without a conclusion.
London, UK, 1935. Decades after the famous killer Jack the Ripper terrorized all of London, the streets of Whitechapel still held a gloomy atmosphere. But in the 1930s, the townspeople were confronted with a new nightmare, a series of mysterious disappearances in one of the abandoned alleys. At first, they were just rumors, but they soon turned into a blood-chilling urban legend. Locals called this place Ripper's Alley, claiming that it was haunted by the ghost of history's first serial killer. Soon, people began to disappear in the alley. No clues, no witnesses. The only thing that connected all the disappearances was the location and the stories of those who saw something there that defied all logical explanation. They spoke of cold touches, strange rustling sounds, and the feeling that someone was watching them. Rumor had it that the ghost of Jack the Ripper, finding no peace, had returned to his old hunting ground. Those who dared to enter the alley said that the ghost resembled the shadow of a man in a top hat, who would appear and then immediately vanish. At first, the city authorities ignored these stories, considering them just local folklore. But when the number of disappearances began to grow, the police were forced to admit that something strange was happening. Investigators could not find a single lead, and the case was archived as the mystery of Whitechapel. This only reinforced the idea in people's minds that something supernatural was behind what was happening, that the very spirit of Jack the Ripper still roamed this alley. Today, more than 80 years later, the story of the ghost of Whitechapel lives on as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that haunt us from the past. This is not just the legend, but an eternal echo of brutal crimes. The alley where these events took place has become a place of pilgrimage for lovers of mysticism and true crime stories who believe that by entering it, they can hear the whisper of a killer who has long since rested in his grave, but whose spirit has not found peace.
The world is full of such unsolved mysteries, and each one is a grim reminder that evil always lurks in the shadows. To hear more terrifying stories, subscribe to the Mr. Amahara channel.